I'm going to go into hiding while Meg goes about the intro.
All right. Hi, everybody, for joining us. We're just going to get started in just a couple minutes. Right. Great. Perfect. So we'll get started here. Great. All right. Hello. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us for the 14th Annual Fox Cities Book Festival. This is our third day. We're super excited that everybody can join us virtually for a great time. We've got a lot of great events going on, and so just wanted to say welcome and thank you so much for attending this one. So the Fox Cities Book Festival is a really a collaboration between the community. We couldn't do it without all of our supporters, from public libraries to school districts to organizations and community members. All of our events are free to attend, and that's done through all of the support from the community. So we just want to take a moment to acknowledge their support and thank them. Sure that works there. Okay, if you would like to support the festival, there's several ways you can do. Attending events is one of the best ways you can. You can donate online. You also can tell your friends about events and share our posts. You can visit us online for any information or questions. And we also are always looking for volunteers, for more so when we can do it in person. So hopefully next year we'll be needing volunteers in person again. For virtual programs, we just wanted to take a moment to say that we want everyone to understand that by attending, we all want everyone to be a good, kind attendee, understand that any harassment of attendees, presenters, or volunteers will not be tolerated. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our fabulous authors for tonight. So we have a really fun program. So we've got Mary Kubica and JT Ellison with us tonight. Just to do a couple brief little bit about the two authors, and then we'll get started. So Mary Kubica is a New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of 7 suspense novels, including The Good Girl, which was she's been to the festival when she had that one. A couple years ago now. Time flies. So it's right here. A former high school history teacher, Mary holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, in history and American literature. She lives outside Chicago with her husband and 2 children. And her most recent novel, A Local Girl Missing. So we're excited. I'll just tell you a little bit about this one, then we can get to the questions. And then for JT Ellison, we're super excited to have you guys together as well. This is really fun. So we have JT Ellison is the New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of more than 25 novels and the Emmy Award-winning co-host of the literary TV show A Word on Words. With millions of books in print, her work has won critical acclaim, prestigious awards, and has been optioned for television and has published in 28 countries. And her newest book is Her Dark Lies. I believe there it says. So I'm super excited to join us. So I'm going to turn it over to you and we'll get started for the program. Thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you, Meg. Meg didn't say it, but she is our vice president of the book festival. She's the reason why, too, when you go to our Facebook, there's a lot of nice thumbnails and things for our recordings. And she also does our website. So Meg, we have to acknowledge her works too.
Any issues? Yeah, it's my fault.
No. Websites always have issues. It's fine. But Mary, JT, it is so wonderful to have you both here. I feel like you are both such legends in the thriller world, in the writing world in general. So we're going to dive into some questions. But that being said, anyone who's watching, whether on Facebook, whether here, if you have a question that you want us to mention to throw out, please send it at any time. Otherwise, we'll go through our list. But again, at any time you have something you want to know, send that our way too. So first of all, Meg mentioned in your description the titles of your newest novels. You both have a wide variety of works, but can you tell our readers who are here just a little bit about your newest novels and some of the themes that maybe you want our readers to take from them? And if the cat would like to add some detail, we are down for that.
Okay, make your appearance, please, and then go. Okay. She does it every single time, every Zoom. She has to get on, say hi, show her tail, and then leave.
Just a little
Mary, I know, it's just a tail. It's like a shark fin going by. Mary, you go first. I'm all discombobulated.
Okay, so Local and Missing is my latest book, and that came out in May, and it's about to come out in paperback in just a couple weeks on November 2nd. And this one is set in the suburbs of Chicago, where over the course of just a couple weeks, 2 women and a young girl go missing, and there's an investigation into their disappearances. The police uncover some clues, but ultimately the cases go cold until 11 years later, when this little girl who was 6 and now she's 17 suddenly returns, and everybody wants to know where she's been all this time and where are the others. So some of the themes that I touch on this book is I talk a lot about just kind of living in the suburbs and kind of that false semblance of safety, which, you know, it may not be as safe as you think in the suburbs, and, you know, just these tight-knit communities and friendships that are maybe not all that they seem to be, and also just kind of how, you know, you may think you know people, but that you can only know as much about them as they're willing to share with you. And these are kind of themes that really run throughout all of my books, you know, and I love to really get into the psychology of people, and just, you know, that people are not always what they seem to be.
And it's got a killer opening.
Thank
It gave me, that opening.
Thank you.
Just blew me away. So my newest is Her Dark Lies, which is an homage to Rebecca. It is the story of a young up-and-coming large format oil painter named Claire Hunter, who falls in love with the man of her dreams, Jack Compton, and they are getting ready for their incredible destination wedding on his family's private Italian island. And then things go dreadfully wrong. There's a break-in in their house. Somebody is killed. They have to leave the country to go to this wedding. And everything that could possibly go wrong does, which is basically the theme of every novel that I've ever written. Things are fine until they're not. But it was a really fun story to tell, and trying to envision, I mean, so many people have read Rebecca. How do you reimagine a story like that? So instead of doing that, I had an intrinsic question that I was trying to answer. What if Rebecca hadn't died? And that is what this story is.
That is so awesome to hear. And so both of your works are pretty complex. Like, there's a lot happening in all of your books. How do you begin writing a new novel? What is that process like?
L.
That sums it up.
I don't know about you. Every time I start, I forget how to do it. It's like I've never done it before. It feels insurmountable. I write 100 words and it's like, okay, 99,900 to go. You know, it's really, it's a little demoralizing to start, actually, and struggle. And, you know, I don't know about you, Mary, but, you know, towards the end of a book, I'm writing 3,000 words a day. But at the beginning, if I get 300, it's like, yay, go me.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's one of those crazy things that you would think, everything gets easier with practice. You would think the more books that we write, the easier that they would get. And that's just not the case. I think for me, it gets a little easier once I have that connection with the characters. And I feel like I really understand who they are and kind of where the story is going to take me. But I'm totally not a plotter. So when I start a new book, I just have like a tiny seed of an idea. And with Local and Missing, it was this girl escaping from captivity. And I didn't know what was going to happen when she got home. I didn't know why she was in captivity. I hadn't figured out any of those things. So, I just kind of latch onto this idea and start writing, and I write for a while and, create some characters and see if this idea has legs. And sometimes it doesn't. And admittedly, sometimes it does. And sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I'll get a bunch of words, few chapters, whatever, into the book and realize, no, this story isn't as great as that first idea. I think that I need to try something new. So sometimes it's a little bit of trial and error, but there always comes a certain point during the writing process that I'm just hooked. And, I know that this is the book for me, that these characters are just screaming at me to write this book. And that's when the process becomes really fun.
Thank you. Thank you. So building off of that, have you had, do you have a way to gauge if when you're thinking of ideas of possible twists that are happening, how do you gauge if it is real or plausible?
Wow. I mean, it's not like we could just go to the neighbor's house and say, excuse me, I'm going to break in and murder you.
That
doesn't really work. But, fight scenes, I've been known to, be fighting shadow boxing in my office to make sure stuff like that works. And, I was going to say romantic scenes. Sometimes you can work those out too. It just depends. I don't know. That's a really hard question. Yeah. Mary's going to have a much better answer.
No, but I am of the belief that everything can really be plausible if you give it enough substance, if there's enough of the why and how did this happen behind it. It's the things that are just kind of dropped on the reader that then feel implausible. But if you kind of build up to it and have, those layers in the book that support it, then I think anything goes,
I agree. As long as you can't take a left turn at Toledo and just, people are like, what are you doing? This makes no sense whatsoever, especially with a twist. We write books that have twists, and the twists have to be inevitable to the story, surprising yet inevitable.
Yes. You want that reader to have that aha moment instead of, you don't want them to feel like they got the rug pulled out from underneath them. You want them to go back and reread the book and see all those layers and clues that you put there that they missed the first time. So I totally agree with you, JT.
And I will say, as a reader of your books, I think there's times where once you reach that conclusion, you're like, how did I not see that coming? Oh my goodness. But that's half of the fun, to keep guessing. And when you learn, it makes you want to go back and see all the things that were obviously there that you just didn't piece together. Mm-hmm. But are there any mystery tropes that you feel are overused?
Oh. Yes, for sure. When I started my Taylor Jackson series, I wanted to write a strong, I hate the term strong female lead because all women are strong, an extraordinary female lead, a woman who was extraordinary because of who she was, not because of how she was made. And that's one of the tropes. Mary and I have actually talked about this. That is one of the tropes that I think it gives characters complexity if they're born in blood, right? If they were hurt as a child, if their sister was murdered, if they've got a missing friend, those kinds of things. And I think the challenge is to write somebody who is interesting without those crutches. And that's something that I've done to some success in some ways, and in other ways it's incredibly limiting when they don't have that thing to fall back on.
Yeah. For sure. I'm not a huge fan of the just like really incredibly unlikable characters. I feel like, and that's something that I feel like you see in a lot of mysteries and suspense novels. But as a reader, I want to have some sort of emotional connection with these characters. They don't all have to be likable, but I think you probably know, there's like the extremely unlikable characters that you just as a reader cannot connect with. They're almost just over the top unlikable. And so as a reader, I struggle with those because I want to care about these characters. I want to care what happens to them at the ends. And so in turn, I kind of try and do that when I'm creating my own characters. I want them to resonate with the reader. So that's one for me.
Thank you. So then it was kind of just brought up, but what role do you find gender stereotypes tend to play in setting up your novels? And what do you find about that happening in most works in general, aside from your novels?
Yeah. I think so often the woman is the victim. I think that that's kind of something that a lot of mystery writers use. And I know I too have used that many times. I mean, here I have, two women and a girl in captivity, or, they've gone missing. And, but it's one of those things that every time I start a new book, I really think about, okay, the woman doesn't have to be the victim. She could be the heroine, or she could be the perpetrator, so there are so many roles that women can play in these stories. And so it's something that I definitely make myself think about, and just kind of, look at my books in that way and try and give more roles and more, just more agency to my female characters.
And I would add that something interesting has happened over the past decade. When I started in publishing and I'm writing dark thrillers, they wanted to say I was writing romantic suspense. I was not writing romantic suspense. And I think the romantic suspense readers would get very upset when they would read my book and it wouldn't have the things that they were expecting from a romantic suspense novel. And I think that has changed so dramatically. I think the idea of the female thriller author has been championed now by the industry. And it is something that has given me a lot of freedom building characters, building women that are complex, who do have all kinds of interesting little peccadillos and things that are coming out of their life. And it makes my male characters even stronger. And it's just, I don't know if it's given me more confidence in my work that there are so many of us now that nobody is just kind of looking down their nose and saying, oh, that's women's writing. It's definitely, we've broken through that glass ceiling. And I really am excited about that. Helps the work.
And I will say too, it helps the reading become more interesting too when there's that freedom, because you don't want to just have a box of you can only read characters like this. You want the variety, right? And that's you guess more too. So then you have brought up about your character types, but have you ever based a character off of someone you know, good or bad, and do they know?
That's a great question. I have not. Sometimes a character might have like the mannerisms of somebody that I know, or, a friend or my husband. Somebody might say something and it's just, a line of dialogue that makes its way into one of my books. But on the whole, my characters are totally fictional. What about you, JT?
Yeah, me too. I was on a panel recently with someone that said she killed all of her ex-boyfriends. I was like, oh my gosh, I like my ex-boyfriends, I want to kill them. But yeah, I do have real people in my books, but usually it's because they have won a contest or they bid on a character name, and then they get to be a character in the book, and then they are a real person. But as far as the characters that I create, it's the same thing. We assimilate all the inputs around us. Of course, the joke is, if you didn't want me to write about you, you shouldn't have acted so badly. But that's, I definitely do not. I believe in karma. There's enough in my imagination to pull together characters that, I don't need that. Now, just like you'll overhear something, you'll see someone like, oh, that's who I want this to base on, but it's not someone we know.
Right, for sure. And I do in Local and Missing, there is a character of a doula, and I have a wonderful friend who is a doula. And so there, experiences that this character has are based loosely on experiences that my friend has had, just because I've heard her talk, about so many stories and shared so many experiences that she's had in her line of work. So of course I had to work that into the book. But this character in the book, Meredith, is completely fictional. She is not my friend Nikki.
But thank you, Nikki, for the inspiration.
Absolutely.
So then, obviously, as you're writing your stories, there are some dark things that happen, some dark actions, but that's part of the fun of going into a thriller. But how do you balance the darkness and like the brightness of your characters?
Humor.
Mhm.
Humor. Dark. I mean, it's gallows humor, it's dark humor, but there's a moment where you can tip over into too dark and you'll lose the reader because it's just bleak, and bleak is never good in a novel unless it's supposed to, well, Bleak House, unless it's supposed to be bleak, right? But for me, there's always a joke, there's always another way of looking at this to lighten the mood, to bring in a way to let everybody cope, because what they see, when you're writing crime fiction, the characters and the cops who work in there just are seeing such horrifyingly dark things. So it can't be unrelenting like that.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think just balancing it with just like everyday experiences. A lot of my characters are part of a family. So sometimes just seeing those, family interactions and things like that, which are just everyday, and they're not, dealing with whatever the crime is happening and the high suspense. And it's just, seeing mothers interact with their children and things like that, that I think takes that tension down a little bit.
So then diving into even more darkness, how does being a thriller writer impact how you view the world and the people around you?
I think, I'm always looking for inspiration. So I think that I'm always, that's one thing. Everywhere I go, everything I see, conversations that I overhear, I'm always thinking, how can I put a spin on this to make it, some sort of thriller novel? So that's one thing. But I think that I am maybe a little bit less trustful, just because, of course, like to create my books, I always have to envision the worst in these characters. They're hiding some sort of secrets or, whatever. So I think that there are times that I approach real life like that. Not always, for sure, but I definitely think that, I might have my guard on sometimes.
Yeah, I get very suspicious. To the point of being paranoid. I remember I was working out on the deck in my old neighborhood, and somebody came to the neighbor's house in the middle of the day, and somebody answered the door, and I was like, what is happening? What is happening? They're supposed to be at school. She left. What? Oh my God. And your mind starts building a story off of that,
Yeah.
right? And that's this weird dark gift that we have that, anybody else just be like, oh yeah, a salesman came to the door. We're like, an assassin just tried to get in your house. Just so you know, you need to like check all the windows when you get home. They were casing the joint. We conflate things and blow them up into stuff that's just not real, but they pay us to do it. So
right. And going off that, I do think too, you feature characters who have dark secrets, but we all have things that we're not, telling everyone, right? So beyond that, what do you think the draw for thrillers are for most readers?
Mm-hmm. I think that it's kind of, the same reason that everybody's into true crime right now, is just that it's one of those things, we can enjoy it because it's not happening to us. We can read this or watch this or whatever from the safety of our own homes. And just, it's like you pass a car accident on the street and you slow down to look, we kind of like love to see bad things happening, and we're grateful that they're not happening to us. So I think it feeds that sort of need and desire that we as humans have.
I read something recently about why we are drawn to things that scare us. And it's an amygdala thing that you have to, it goes all the way back to when we were cavemen and we were under constant threat, and our bodies are built for that. And so we don't do well when we're not put into high adrenal situations, which I thought was really, really fascinating, because I personally don't like to be scared. I don't like scary movies. I don't like scary books. But for thrillers, there is the there, but for the grace of God, go I. But there's also, I think, an element of justice. We get to get the bad guy, and the bad guy, bad girl, whoever is going to be vanquished by a hero. And I think the books that don't work are the ones that there isn't that definable good and evil. We need to have that. We want to have that kind of, I hate the word closure, but we want to have some level of, okay, he got what was coming to him.
And often your books are put under both mystery, and then there's like, if you dive deeper into sections, we find your books under psychological thrillers. What would you say the difference between mystery and psychological thriller is? What is the line?
We're both like, you go. Really, you go. No, really, you go.
I feel like I hear so many different, genre names for whether it's thriller, suspense, domestic suspense, psychological suspense, so many different categories that our books fall into. And I sat on a panel once. I wasn't on it, thankfully, because I wouldn't have known what to say. But I listened, and it was all about the difference between thrillers and suspense. And I was fascinated because I think going into it, I really had no idea that I would have been able to say what the difference was between thrillers and suspense. But I don't know, with the psychological, I just think that, it isn't so much about who did it sometimes, but it's a why did it, why did this happen? And just so much the psychology, behind what is happening. And so I think that that's where the difference lies. It's not being suspense versus thriller. I think it's not so much about like gore on the page, but more just really making the reader think.
So I feel like mystery, the reader is finding out at the same time as the character what's happening in the story. If you're going to be, this is the technical. For thrillers and suspense, I like to use a door analogy. For a thriller, the main character is going to be on the outside of the door, and they're going to be the ones knocking and ruining somebody's life. If it's a suspense novel, your life is the one being ruined. You're the one on the other side. You're opening the door to whatever this situation is. So it's an ordinary person in an extraordinary situation versus a thriller, which is usually an extraordinary, it's a cop, it's a law enforcement, it's a spy, it's somebody who is expected to be in the kind of situation that they're in. So those are my technical differences. And obviously, the emotion of the psychological thriller, the domestic noir, I think psychological often has an unreliable narrator as well. That, you're on kind of quicksand with the story. You're not sure what exactly is going on. And the main character is probably not giving you all the clues that you need to solve the story.
I appreciate too that we don't have definite answers, because I think your books have been thrown under lots of names, which rightfully so. You have elements of so many different things. I know at my library we have a psychological thriller or psychological mystery section too, and it's one of those, if the law isn't as prevalently involved, or but it's interesting how we all have our different versions of what that means, right? So one question that we want to know is, how does writing your stories impact your reading of similar stories?
It's my favorite genre to read. I'm sure that surprises nobody. But I think that I'm so like caught up in the technical part of writing and reading now, that whenever I'm reading a book, and some author has managed to totally shock me at the end, I instantly want to go back. I want to know, how did this author surprise me so much? I was listening to, I do a lot of audiobooks, and I was listening to The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides, just, I think it was over the summer. And, the minute I got to the end, and, it just blew my mind, and I did not see it coming at all. I got to the end, and like I had to go get a physical copy of the book and like study it, because I wanted to know how he did that. And so I think that my brain, I can relax and just enjoy a book, but I feel like challenged in a very good way when I read some psychological thriller that I just love. I feel so excited, and like the bar has been raised, and I want to do better, and it inspires me. And I've had the same editor since the beginning. And so having gotten feedback on my books from her for many, many years, I always feel too, like when I'm reading, I can see like Erica sitting on my shoulder, like a little Erica. And I'm always thinking, what would Erica say about this? And things like that. So, the whole process has definitely changed the way that I read.
It is. I reading is harder for me now, because I'm just deconstructing it, right? Anytime I'm reading something and it's good, same thing. I'm just like, okay, how did they do this? What was the thought process? The other weird thing is we know everybody. And that actually plays into this, because I'll hear, we've had drinks at the bar, and then I'm reading the book and I hear their voice instead of the character's voice. And so that's a challenge for me. I like to read out of the genre. I read a lot out of the genre, and I go to fantasy a lot, because the world building just is incredible. And it really helps bring in ideas for me of how to build a psychological thriller, how to build a mystery, because I've experienced this completely new way of telling a story. And that's, I actually don't read as much in the genre as I used to, because it's hard to separate the author from the work. I get better at it. I'll get better at it.
You can do it.
I do. I mean, trust me, if you look to my left, there's a lot of thrillers.
So we have someone who is watching who asked, specifically citing the example of Local Woman Missing. They said, Local Woman Missing surprised me completely in a good way. Do either of you have friends read to see if they'll guess your twists?
So for the longest time, I had not done that. I would write my draft, and I would share it with my editor and my agent, and that was it. Nobody really looked at it again until it was on a bookshelf, or, I was sending out ARGs to get blurbs and things like that. But then when I wrote 2 books ago, The Other Misses, it was the first book that usually I don't know my twists when I write the book. So, and so I can't, share that information with my editor. So when she reads it, she goes into it completely blind, and so then I can get her perspective. But with The Other Misses, I knew the twist, and I stupidly, in retrospect, put it in my proposal. So when she later went to edit the book, she knew exactly where that story was going. And so did I. And so it was one that was really hard for us to know, was the twist going to be a surprise? Or was I a little too heavy-handed in my clues and things like that? And so I'm actually in a book club, and I had never done this before, but I took like 10 ladies from my book club and asked them, after my editor and I had gone through all of our revisions and it was basically done, but I asked them, could they just read this book and just tell me what they think. And they did a phenomenal job. They said, on page 43, this is what I think is happening, and this is why. And it was so helpful, because if on page 43, someone guessed the twist, then I knew, okay, I've got to pull back a little bit here. So it was so great, because obviously reading is so subjective, and, just one look at Goodreads and will tell you that, some people guess the twist, some don't, some people love one thing and they hate another. And, you're never going to please everybody, but it was just so helpful to get that information on the twists and the clues and all that. So then I loved it so much that I did that again with Local Women Missing. And I just feel like it really, kind of took the books to another level, because I was able to get so many more eyes on them when they were still in draft format.
Her Dark Lies is actually the first book that I didn't have beta readers because I was behind and I had to turn it in. And so my agent and my editor were my beta readers. But normally my dad is my first reader. He reads everything in draft form, and he's really good at saying, you gave it away. This doesn't work for me. And then I've got a cadre of friends who will also read for me. My best friend reads everything, usually also in draft form. I've been known to send her chapters. Okay, this is in first person, this is in third person. Which do you like better? Which voice is working better for the story? I also have a number of readers who are experts in the field. So cops, military, death investigators. One of my really, really great friends is a death investigator. And I am regularly sending her stuff and saying, okay, this is the poison that we chose. Is this what would happen? Is this realistic? I remember having her, she helped me figure out how to poison a picnic basket once. And it was, it's great fun. I want to make sure that my work is accurate. Anytime I have technical stuff, I want to be sure that that's happening. I actually just had a reader read one of my first books, and he wrote me completely unbidden and said, hey, listen, I'm going to give you an editorial letter. I was like, well, thank you for that. The book was published 10 years ago, but okay, let's work on that. And he actually caught some stuff that nobody else caught. So he's a total stranger, and I'm actually thinking about asking him to just do a cold read on my next book, because if he can catch something that 50 people missed as we were building this book. I mean, I have a rapacious handbag. How do you have a rapacious handbag? It's supposed to be capacious. I was like, okay, you win. So I like to get input from other people. I like, my husband, he hears the story because most nights at dinner, once I'm really into it, I'm kind of relaying, okay, this happened. I think this is next. Yeah, I'm all down with the collaborative. And my editor, I don't like to send her something until I know I'm ready for her to dig into it and make it better, because by that time, I've lost all perspective. I think it's terrible. I think it's crap. And I have to give it to her and have her say, okay, this is not bad. Because I'm sending it to her saying my career is over. This is awful. No, this is not going to work. And she comes back and she's like, it's the best book you've written yet. So let's relax. It takes a village for me.
It does. Yeah. Yeah. And that self-doubt, like, why does that never go away? I don't know if it's that we're so hard on ourselves for one, but I think that the books are just so personal, and for a year or 8 months or however long it takes to make that draft, you just pour your blood, sweat, and tears into it. So I don't know.
I think we lose perspective. I think we genuinely lose perspective. All we're thinking about is the mechanism of putting the story together. We can't read the story and experience it until somebody out there says, hey, this is great. Take a breath. You're fine.
Yes.
And that's like the best moment ever, when you get that affirmation that your work has paid off.
Good, for sure. And the distance too. I know that when I send my manuscripts to my editor and she has them for a month or whatever, and she's reading it, that is so valuable, just because if she has it, I'm probably thinking about it, but I'm not working on it. Mm-hmm. And so just when it comes back to me and I can look at it with fresh eyes, that is so important.
Agreed.
So you both touched upon like the cycle of writing, like you have those moments of self-doubt, How would you describe your writing process? Like if you had to map it out as a whole for us per book, what is it like?
I feel like I'm just winging it. I get that idea and I'm kind of often writing. I always write my books from multiple perspectives, and in Local and Missing, I had 4 different narrators. So when I write, I actually just take one of those narrators at a time, though, and write his or her story in its entirety. And then I go back and I pick up another one of the narrators and write his or her story in their entirety. So if anyone read Local and Missing, I wrote Delilah's chapter. Delilah's a unique one in that she's just one really really big chapter, but I wrote that first. And then I went back, there's a character named Kate, and I wrote Kate's entire story, and then I set it aside. And then I wrote all of Meredith, set it aside, and all of Leo. And then I literally, take it to like Kinko's or whatever, and I print it out, and I have my 4 stacks of paper and start to physically work this book in together into one story. So, I don't plot at all. I think maybe a chapter ahead at some point in the writing process, I start to think a little further ahead and start to think about that twist and how I'm going to get to that twist. But that's it, and it's one of those things. I know I have a lot of great author friends who do plots. And, I think that sometimes it would save me some heartache in the long run and the rewrites and things like that if I thought some things out in advance. But I just love that spontaneity and just that organic feel of, just seeing the story take shape on its own and getting up in the morning and turning on my computer and literally having no idea what's going to happen that day on the page.
I used to be like that. And as I've gotten further along, I don't plot because I don't like to outline, right? I don't like to say, this is going to happen, then this is going to happen. Then that makes me uncomfortable. It gives me hives. I too have friends that, they know the entire story. Every detail is plotted out before they start writing. And I just can't do that. That kind of takes the fun out for me. But I've started doing something called 40 scenes because before I start writing a book, there's always going to be a voice that's talking to me. And I'm a very, very visual writer, and I hear and see the characters in scenes. I see little bits of dialogue. I see a room. My newest book that's done now and coming out, 23. It was the character walking on the beach. I knew that there was a scene with the character walking on the beach. So I take all of that kind of chaos and I just write down every single scene. And when I get to 40, if you do writer math, if every scene equals 2,000 words, that's 80,000 words right there. And that seems to be working for me. I've done it now for 3 books, and it's really cool because I'll write the 40 scenes and then never look at them again. They've just cemented themselves. And I actually, the one that I'm working on right now, I went this week and I looked at the scenes and I was like, all right, I've knocked out that, and that. Okay, those go into their own folder and here's what's left. And I didn't look at it necessarily. I just kind of glanced at what the headers were. So, but every book is different. Some of them need to be plotted. Some of them can be completely organic. It just depends. A series title is way easier to write without an outline than a standalone for me. It's for a series, the world's built, the characters are already there. I'm just putting them into a situation and letting them respond. When you have to build the entire world and it's a psychological, so there's got to be some sort of twist and everything, I do a little more prep work on that than I used to.
So we have a question from Facebook. Gavin sent it. So Gavin, thank you. Who is your favorite classic detective? And then they cited examples such as Sherlock Holmes, Poirot, Nancy Drew, etc.
Wow. Jack Reacher. I think he's become a classic detective, right? He's the knight errant who rides into town and something happens. I really like Charlie Bird in John Connolly's series. And oh my gosh, there's so many. That's impossible. I haven't read a lot of the classics, so I don't, I can't answer that in terms of the classic. I can just answer Charlie Parker. I called him Charlie Bird. Charlie Parker in the John Connolly series. He's pretty spectacular.
I'm going to go with Nancy Drew. I grew up reading Nancy Drew, just devouring those. So yeah.
I like Nancy Drew too. I have a whole bunch of them upstairs.
All right. And then we have actually another question that was sent in. The question is to please share your journey to publication. Did you seek an agent, submit to conventional publishers, or explore independent publishers?
Yeah, so I used to be a high school history teacher, but I love to write, my whole life. And gosh, after my daughter was born, this was back in 2005, I stopped teaching. I thought it was temporarily while I started my family. And it was very soon after she was born, like days or weeks, that I started working on The Good Girl, which is my first published book. And I had written many things before then, nothing that I had finished. But The Good Girl, I started writing it whenever my daughter was asleep or napping or just content. I would work a little bit on my book, and it took about 5 years to write. And then when it was done, it was the first thing that I felt really compelled to try and get published. So I had not studied creative writing in college. I had never been part of a writer's group. I had no idea what to do with this manuscript. And so I started doing some research and got my hands on, it's called The Writer's Market, and it's a book that lists literary agents. And I wrote up query letters and started sending The Good Girl out to many literary agents. And I didn't keep great track of how many agents I sent it to, but it was like 75 to 100 agents that I sent, that I queried for The Good Girl. And right away, I started getting rejections. Like the minute I had sent on email, the rejections started coming in. And there were a couple agents. Usually you'll send, a couple chapters or 50 pages or just that query letter. And if they're interested, they'll ask to read more. There were a couple agents that asked to read the entire manuscript, but ultimately every single agent that I sent The Good Girl to passed on it. Nobody wanted to represent it. And, I was sad, but I moved on. I started working on something else. I don't know what it was or where it is, because I felt like at that time in my career, The Good Girl was just the best that I could do. And 2 years actually passed since I sent out all those query letters, when one day, totally out of the blue, I get a reply from one of these agents who had previously rejected it. And it just so happens that when she first read The Good Girl, she was right out of college. She was brand new to this literary agency, and she was working as an assistant for an agent. And, she had been given the job of going through the slush pile and seeing if there was anything worth pursuing. And she read The Good Girl. She loved The Good Girl, but she just couldn't get the rest of her team on board. So within those next 2 years, though, she was promoted from an assistant to an actual literary agent. And she remembered The Good Girl for those 2 years. And so when she was in a position to represent her own clients, she reached out to me to see if, the book was still available, if I was working with an agent already. So it was a dream come true, and in retrospect, it was just the best way it could happen, because I knew she was so incredibly passionate about this book for her to remember it for 2 years and to seek it out after all that time. So then she and I worked together. We kind of cleaned up the book a little bit. And within a couple months, she was sending it out to publishers.
That's so awesome.
Yeah,
I love that story. I love that story. Mine was different. I had gone to school to be a writer, and I was planning to go and get an MFA and move on through that. And my thesis advisor told me I wasn't good enough to get published. So I quit writing for 8 years and followed another path. And then we moved to Nashville, and I was kind of like a bad country music song. I had no friends. My cat died. I kept getting lost. It was just a really rough transition. And I knew I had always wanted to write a book. I couldn't find a job. I went to work for the vet. The cat died, and then we adopted a new cat, and the vet that gave her shots and everything, he was looking for someone, and I thought I was going to work at the front desk, but he wanted me to be a vet tech. And if you've ever been on the other side of the door in the vet's office, it's not so great. They had to put a cat down like the second day I was there, and I was like, and this is never going to work for me. So I was going to quit on Friday. I was going to give him a whole week, and I picked a dog up. I picked up a golden retriever and threw a disc in my back. Had to have back surgery. And while I was recovering, I went to the library and said I was interested in crime fiction. And the librarian said, "Have you ever read John Sanford?" I said, "No." And she gave me the first Lucas Davenport novel, and 3 novels in, I went, this is it. This is it. If he can do this, so can I. Not realizing that he's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist who knew what he was doing. And I really had no idea what I was doing. But I started doing research. I called down to Metro Nashville and asked them if there had ever been a serial killer in Nashville. And they had me in. I ended up doing 8 ride-alongs, did a ton of research. It got very, very real, very fast. And I wrote a novel, sent it out, got a lot of rejections because it wasn't actually a novel, didn't know that. Then joined Sisters in Crime, found out, a lot more about the industry. I got a critique group. I became a much better writer, wrote a full-length novel this time. And I was using Publishers Marketplace, which is our Bible. And it has a cool little feature on it that you can check mark this box and says, this writer is looking for an agent. So I did that, and I was getting ready to query the novel everywhere. And I got an email from my dream agent who said, hey, I'd be interested in representing this. Can I read it? And they read it, and they asked for an exclusive, and then they offered representation, and they took it out, and it did not sell. And I was completely devastated because apparently I wasn't good enough to be published. But he said, write me another book. And I did. And he took that one out, and it sold like the next day in a 3-book deal. The night he sent it out, the editor who bought it wrote him and said, don't give this to anybody else. So, it's interesting that we both had a big pause. It helps both. Are you going to take this seriously? Is this the thing that you really want to do with your life? There's going to be rejection after rejection. Even at this point, I'm writing number 27 right now. There's been rejection even in the past month. It's something that just still happens. You have to be prepared for that. I do want to mention indie publishing. It didn't exist in its format when I was coming up. I think it's great. I think it's a great thing. I have an indie press. I am independent publishing urban fantasy under my own press right now because indie publishing owns urban fantasy. It's just something that's really, really successful at its price point. And I think it's a really interesting place for entrepreneurial writers who like to have a little more control over things. I mean, I really love being able to come up with the art, controlling the price, controlling when, where, who, what, how, all of that. That's really fun for me. I also really appreciate having a team around me that can make those decisions for me. If I was doing that full time, I would not be having fun with it, right? It's so much cooler and better for me as an artist to have an editor, to have a marketing team, to have artists and salespeople and stuff to get my work into libraries and stores and all of that. That's very, very important to me and not something I ever want to give up. If it weren't for this particular genre, I wouldn't be doing it like this. I mean, it's just, it's just the way it is. But I think it's something, if you really want to be in control, you have at it. It's a fascinating place. There's a lot of support out there. It's very, very different than it used to be.
Thank you. And then we have another question that says, tagging on to the publishing question. When you started, did you have a book that was turned down by a person who now regrets this decision and has told you?
That's a great question.
I know. Well, I mean, obviously I was rejected by many people, but I have not heard, and even when I had the agent and she was, trying to sell the book to the publishers, I mean, it got turned down by many, many publishers before I did get an offer on it. So I don't know. Nobody has told me, that they regret not not offering on the Good Girl, but I mean, it's possible that there are some out there.
I am friends with a couple of people who I have told them, hey, I actually submitted to you way back when. And they're like, oh, well, it really must have made an impression. So, you know, it's just, yeah, it's one of those things.
That's one of those things too, where your success can be the thing that if they learn later, you know.
Yeah, that's all, you know. It's all fun.
We have Chelsea who asked, what authors' books do you have to get your hands on, or like what ones do you automatically buy no matter the storyline?
JT's.
Mary's.
And I mean it.
Yes.
I mean, I feel like there are so many right in this same genre. Kimberly McCreight, Wendy Walker, Alice Feeney is one that I just love. Jennifer Hillier, and I think she just finished her next book. I don't know when it comes out, but I'm so excited to read that one. Just so many suspense authors that, you know, I just can't wait when I see that they have a new book releasing, or, you know, an arc is available. I just cannot wait to get my hands on it.
So I do a lot in the fantasy realm that immediately, you know, Tracy Dion's got a new series right now that I'm absolutely in love with. And I heard she just finished hers too. And I'm just like, okay, I can't wait. Diana Gabaldon, who is the author of Outlander, everybody knows that. Her book's coming out right before Thanksgiving, and I've already made it very clear to everybody, I will be reading from the release day until I am done. Do not even think about, I'm taking that week off, because I mean, a book of hers is an event, right? When it comes out every 4 or 5 years, it's such an event for me. Deborah Harkness is another one. Oh my gosh. I mean, everyone, there are so many that we've got incredible writers out there right now. You can't, every Tuesday there is a lay down, and I would be on the street if I bought every book that I want. It's just, we are in this incredible moment in time where the quality of the work is outstanding and the distribution is outstanding, and everybody, it's kind of really a fascinating and wonderful time to be a reader.
It is. And I mean, I said earlier that I do a lot of audiobooks, and I can't get through all the books that I want to read because there are just so many. So it's like, I always am listening to one, and I have a physical copy of one, and I'm not complaining.
Yep, I'm the same way. I've got a digital copy going, I've got a physical copy going, and I've got an audiobook going at all times, at least one in each format.
Yes.
I totally get that. We have Gavin who sent another question. He asked, are you concerned about falling into a pattern? In other words, is keeping the twists fresh something you consciously think about? Conversely, is there some value in writing the same book 50 times? Looking at you, Daniel Steele and James Patterson.
I'm always conscious of, trying to do a different twist, a bigger twist, a twist on a twist, whatever, I'm always trying to think, how can I do this differently? Because I think that our genre, this psychological suspense, just relies so heavily on that twist that, from page 2, the reader's already trying to figure out what it is. And so, for me as a writer, I want, of course, my reader to be surprised. And I know that they're not always going to be, there are some very incredibly smart readers out there that are going to figure that twist out early. So, one thing that I think about then is having multiple twists, or like twists on twists and things like that, to keep those readers who can figure, some big part of it out. I want there to still be some layers of surprise for them. So that's, I'm very cognizant of that. And I think that from the minute I start writing a new book, I'm thinking, how am I going to do this? How am I going to make this surprise bigger than the last one? And I don't know. I like mixing it up. I like for all of my books to be a little bit different, and to just, give something new to the reader every time.
I agree. I like to do something original and different. And if I feel like I'm getting stale, I'm going to switch to a completely different kind of story. I've told, I've got a homicide lieutenant. I've got a medical examiner. I've written an international series with Catherine Coulter. I've got the fantasy. I've got the standalones. All the standalones are very, very different. I think that there is great value in the formulaic novel. right? You say Patterson and Danielle Steele. Well, I mean, look at Lee Child. I mean, Reacher's got a formula. That is a formulaic kind of story. And I think the readers love knowing what they're going to get. It's the same reason you rewatch a movie, reread a book, listen to the same song. You know that you're going to have yourself, your experience is going to be one that you're satisfied. And I think satisfied, there is nothing wrong at all with satisfying the reader. And clearly, to have that level of success, you have to be satisfying a lot of readers. I would like to see, I talk about this with people all the time because I'm always curious if there can be a modern series that would have that level of success. And most of the series and most of the writers who are having such huge success are very well established. They got established in the 90s, and they are, they're writing the same kind of stuff. An author who is huge and isn't writing the same book every time is John Grisham. He's really interesting. When he'll do a legal thriller, and then he'll do a baseball book. He does some kids novels. Then he mixes it up, but the books have a commonality in that the reader knows that they're going to get a satisfying story. And I think that's what we all just need to focus on, is making sure the stories are satisfying. If they have, echoes of previous stories, there's only 7 plots. So it's going to be kind of hard not to, at some point over your career, echo yourself a little bit.
And one final question before we say goodnight. What are you both working on right now? Are you able to tell us anything about what you're working on now?
Well, I am working on my next book. I tend to be pretty hush-hush about it though, until, I have finished a draft. So I'm still on that drafting stage, still figuring out a little bit about my characters and where their story is going to go. So I'm not going to say too much about it, but I will say that I am working on the next one and just enjoying it and really excited to share it with you, hopefully sometime next year.
My next one is finished and coming out in February of 2023. And it is a standalone that does not have a title right now. So it's hard to explain stories without titles. We're working on the title as we get into the editorial stream with it. But it is in deeply personal story to me, and I haven't quite figured out how I'm going to talk about it. So that's something that I'm going to be working on. Since I have a little bit of a gap between when I turned in the book and when I have to kind of ramp up with editorial and stuff, I'm actually revisiting my Taylor Jackson series, and I am writing it probably won't be a huge novel, but a short novel in her world right now that I'm trying to get done by Christmas and get that out. And then I'm also working on this fantasy series with my new co-writer, and our next book in that series is coming out in July of next year. So I'll have two series titles out next year, and then a standalone coming at the beginning of 2023.
Well, I'm sure everyone here, and myself included, are so excited to learn what happens next. What is the best way for everyone to stay up to date on what you both are working on?
I'm on social media on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. If you just go to my website, marykubica.com, there are links to all of those. And I love to connect with readers.
And I'm at jtellison.com, and I'm on social media as Thriller Chick. I really highly encourage people to sign up for the newsletter and sign up for all your favorite authors' newsletters, because as we can see, Facebook and Instagram went down for 6 hours, and pretty much it was like an atomic bomb went off for all of us. So, definitely go to your favorite authors' websites and sign up for their newsletters, because that's the only way they can keep in touch with you should something bad happen on social media.
Well, wonderful. And for those who are watching, we did just send the links to both of their websites. Thank you both so much for spending the night with us. This is an awesome way to close out our Friday, and best of luck in the future with all the things you're working on. And when time allows, please come visit us in Wisconsin at some point. And for everyone watching, thank you for joining us as well. We hope to see you at our other events. We still have a full lineup for Saturday and Sunday. And below you should get to see the link if you would like to donate to the festival, and then also a link to a survey which helps us plan for future festivals. Yay! And if you don't see that yet, we will also get that in a follow-up email to you that Zoom puts out automatically anyways. So thank you so much for spending the night with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. It was great.
So much fun.
Bye.
Bye.